Welcome to this session of InfoTouch University Online, where we go in depth into the various features and functions of our point-of-sale product lines, Store Manager and Storekeeper POS. Today's topic is specialized printing needs, specifically support for ticket printing, kitchen printing, and remote printing. There is no difference between the functionality of our two products in these areas, so we'll refer simply to our point-of-sale software from here on out. And let's get going on a little bit of background first, and then into the actual implementation. So, as you know, InfoTouch has been around for quite some time now, 25 years. To be specific, and being around that long, we started out with a DOS-based product and eventually migrated to a Windows platform. In the DOS era, forgive me for belaboring what might appear to be historical points, but it will give you some context here. Starting in the DOS era, we actually did write initially a separate add-on module for what is typically referred to as kitchen printing. So although we've never been a restaurant-oriented product because we are touchscreen based, we do have some presence, particularly in quick service, in bars, and even restaurants that don't have real high-end needs like splitting tickets and tracking tips and things of that sort. So, so we have done a good job in a variety of things like delis and sandwich shops and coffee shops and of the sort that will occasionally require some kind of kitchen printing. And in the DOS world, back in the 1990s here now, we did develop a separate add-on program for remote printing. Okay. So I'll dispense hopefully mostly with the history from here on out. But when we went to the Windows world, an initial thing that came up for us was not kitchen printing, but ticket printing. And it'll be a little bit now. We'll go into the ticket side of things, and I'll come back to kitchen printing and why I gave you a little bit of that introduction here. But kitchen printing, in a restaurant does not really suit the needs of ticket printing in something like a museum. And what I am running right now is the museum vertical in the Store Manager palette. And we do have a presence in museums in places like Austin and Washington State, where we're in art museums, we're in the automotive museum in Hershey, Pennsylvania, classic cars and things of that sort. And we're in a number of venues where our software is used, typically in a gift shop in a museum, but at the point where they're in the gift shop, they also want to be able to print tickets. So in the Windows environment that came into place in more current times, this came up as a requirement that we did not do. That is to say, we would in a gift shop be happy to take your money for, a card and a poster and 3 tickets, but in terms of printing something that would be used to admit you into the museum or into an event, and it really doesn't really need to be museum oriented, it could be any kind of specialized event. We did not have support initially for what is usually referred to as ticket printing, and in particular there are printers that generally are oriented for this kind of environment. So we wound up, through our ability to go ahead and support a variety of printers through both Windows drivers and OPOS drivers, added support to the product for specifically printing to ticket printers. Okay, but the physical ability to communicate with those printers is not sufficient. We actually need to be able to deal with things differently. So if I go into a museum and I go into a gift shop and I buy, a t-shirt that's got the museum's logo on it and 2 tickets, I want a normal standard receipt on my, typically these days, thermal receipt printer that shows what I bought for everything, but also I need specific tickets to come out on my ticket printer that shows that I bought, say, 2 admission tickets. All right, so we wound up dealing with that in a variety of ways, and we'll start with setup and departments. So when you go into setup departments, you'll notice there's a checkbox on the bottom for every department called ticket printing. And so if I am going into a museum and I'm buying clothing, or I'm in the gift shop, I certainly don't need a ticket for it. But if I go to buy a ticket to be admitted or go to some sort of special event, then I do in fact want ticket printing. Okay, so what we did with the software to start with to support ticket printing in this kind of museum event-driven environment is add a checkbox that simply says, by department, when I sell something in this department, in addition to printing my normal receipt, I want an extra thing to come out somewhere, and we'll define thing in just a second, that is associated with a ticket for these items. So to turn on ticket printing for museums and event-driven environments, you simply need to check ticket printing for 1 or more departments. That's step 1. Step 2 is to go ahead and define exactly what happens once you have 1 or more departments that support ticket printing. And that's done in invoice receipt formats. Okay. So let me skip for a second straight to the 3rd tab here, Buy, Tender, and Transaction. And you'll find that if you have 1 or more departments with the ticket printing option checked, you will get this display here on the bottom left-hand side. Otherwise, you won't see it. It says, hey, wait a minute, okay. And you can see from the tooltip text, hopefully, that it says select a special receipt format for tickets. So when you have ticket printing enabled, we dedicate one of the 10, here's the 10, invoice, receipt 1 to 9, one of the 10 different predefined formats that we're going to solely use for ticket printing. Okay, that's nice. So what happens from there? Well, if we go back to our by type side, you'll notice that I have a special format by type with a special driver associated with it. So normally what happens in this environment is, let's say I've got my typical, Epson or SNBC or Pixelon or what have you, a star receipt printer, and then I'm normally printing my receipts in the gift store too. And that's going to be great and sufficient for everything where they're simply buying items to take home. I was in a gift store in a museum in Illinois recently, Jeanette, where we bought a T-shirt, and we bought a piece of jewelry and a book as well. So none of those things require tickets, but on the other hand, for entry into the museum, we do want to print special tickets. So what we say is that we're going to use our normal receipt printing functions for printing anything, any kind of sale, or suspended sale, and we'll get into suspended sales more on the kitchen printing side of things. But on top of that, in addition to whatever other receipts I might normally get, including duplicate receipts based on tender type and all sorts of options you might find in miscellaneous setup for that, on top of all those normal receipts, I want to print out extra receipts for items in my ticket printing department. And instead of having those print with a normal receipt format, I'm going to define a specific format. In this case, receipt 9 is the default, but you can use any of the 10 that you choose. And optionally, I don't want this to go to my standard Epson receipt printer. I want this to go to my ticket printing printer, which I've got set up and maybe even shared between registers. So with a Windows driver, for example, I could potentially share multiple registers to use that same ticket printer. All I need is a Windows printer driver for it. You also have the option of overriding that receipt format by OPOS, although OPOS is exclusive and cannot be shared among different types of, or different registers. Now, this is my laptop we're working on. The only thing I'm going to be printing on today is, in fact, my Adobe PDF driver. I'm going to be using that for both regular receipts as well as for ticket and other types of printing. And the reason for that is you'll be able to see what I print as soon as I'm done with it. So, all right, so what I'm saying here is that my special Receipt 9, which I've defined here as my ticket printing format, will automatically go to some specific driver rather than to my standard receipt printer. Okay, so step 3 is to say, all righty, let's go ahead now and modify the format for that. Now think about what's happening in a museum. Besides buying the t-shirts and what have you, I need to print admission tickets. Well, those admission tickets don't look a whole lot like my normal receipt that go in. I don't need all the information about, the date and the time and the location and the tender amount and all the other items. Really, I'm only looking for stuff that is related to what I want to print out on my ticket, my entry ticket, or my admission ticket. So in the invoice formatter, we would want to go ahead, and I've already done this in advance, so we don't have to do this, wait too long for this. Under Receipt 9, I've defined an extremely simple format. Here's the name of my business, the Museum of whatever, and I've got some text in there that says Admit 1, and then the description of what I bought. So what happens when we do a sale with ticket printing is this. We print whatever receipts we normally print, and then afterwards we print this special format for every unit of every item in a ticket printing department. So if I go to the register now, and I'm going to do that right now, so here's my very simplistic format for my ticket printing. And let's go to the register. Now, as it turns out, by the way, both my regular receipts and my tickets are going to an Adobe PDF driver, so you can see what's going on. But I haven't set it up that way, and that would be normally what you would do. So normally you would have your regular receipts going to, say, an Epson Thermal, or maybe at TPG Opaz, we don't really care, but then your special tickets are going to a different setting. All right, so as it turns out, I've got admission and events set up for ticket printing. So let's go in and show you, first of all, what happens when you don't do this. So I'm going to go in and I'm going to buy some sort of clothes from this. And this is a museum with a variety of things in there. You'll find in the Store Manager palette if you download it. So I'm going to buy some pair of sweatpants with a logo on it. And I'm going to pay cash for it. And again, remember, my regular receipts now are set up to go to this PDF driver, which is what you're seeing here. I'm just going to overwrite the file I use all the time for this. And here's my regular receipt, the Museum of Touch, quantity 1, item number, amount, description, subtotal, your typical receipt. And that's that. All right, let's buy some more clothes here. And I'm not really concerned what item I'm buying. But let's now say that the customer is also going to buy a couple of admission tickets. So they're members, and the various types of members here I'm not really clear about. This was an old demo that we set up, but it's a good vehicle for going in and demonstrating what we can do in a museum. So let's say I go in with my wife, so I want to buy 2 tickets. I have turned on the options to prompt for the quantity for this department, by the way, which I can show you. Prompt for quantity. And also, by the way, in miscellaneous setup, one of the things that probably ought to be the default but is not today is to prompt for the quantity after the item is rung up. By default, if we prompt for quantity, we will do it before the item is rung up. Honestly, in the real world, it generally is more useful to do it afterwards. So this is turned on today. Okay, so that's why this is prompting for quantity as soon as I ring up the item. And let's say, again, I'm buying for my wife and myself, so we'll buy 2 tickets. Okay, I'm going to pay cash for that. And the first thing that comes out is the same old regular receipt format that we just saw a few seconds ago. So here's my regular receipt, and then forgive the fact that I haven't filled in the address information up top here, but this is a demo. And, you know, I bought this logo piece of clothing, and I bought 2 tickets. So everything looks the same as normal, right? Well, not quite, because on top of that receipt, the software is saying, hey, wait a minute, now I need to print some tickets because they bought 2 sponsored adult admissions. So here's the first one. When I say the first one, remember there's quantity 2 here. Okay. With ticket printing, it's a little bit unusual because when you buy quantity 2, you don't want one receipt that shows quantity 2. You want 2 separate tickets. Or at least that's what most folks want, and that's what we do. Oops. It does help to actually close down. Okay, so I went a little quick there, but remember that very scaled down receipt 9 format we looked at a few seconds ago. The name, Museum of Touch, straight text, admit 1, and here is the description of the ticket that we bought. And since I bought 2 of them, we're going to try and print 2, and I need to close this one before I can actually print the second one. Now, by the way, that would not normally happen on your ticket printer, but it does happen when you're writing to files, since Windows will not allow you to overwrite a file that is being viewed by another application. And here's the same ticket once again. So, ticket printing is just what you see. It's very straightforward. It relies on the fact that you're using most likely a separate printer for printing tickets, and there are dedicated printers in this environment for that can potentially be shared over a network or not, as the case may be. And on top of your regular printing of a receipt, you can also print tickets, and those tickets can be in their own defined format, which would usually be very simplistic, as we've seen. And you would get a separate ticket for each unit you sold, not for each line item, but for each unit of each line item you sold in a department with ticket printing checked. All right, so that's ticket printing. And you're probably saying, why did this guy start off with all this stuff about kitchen printing? All right, well, I mentioned we did kitchen printing because once we did ticket printing, it turned out just historically as we went forward in time that that we wound up getting more and more requests for this remote printing function in places like sub shops and maybe even ethnic restaurants, like a simple Chinese or Mexican restaurant where we're really not a full-blown dining solution, but they don't care about that, and they just need something to print in the back when something has been ordered. And as we thought about that, and we thought about migrating the full-blown separate add-on module we had in the DOS world for kitchen printing, it occurred to us that maybe rather than doing this from scratch, we could take advantage of the ticket printing function that we already did. And that is, in fact, what we wound up doing. So if you think about it, okay, I might be in a let's say I'm in a deli, and we prepare sandwiches in the back. So we're in a sit-down deli. They come up to us, and they take our order, and I order a grilled cheese on rye. So they take my order and they enter it into the system, and they enter it as a wholesale because, I might decide later on that I want another soft drink or what have you, or maybe I'm going to get a dessert. So rather than making it a sale, this being a sit-down kind of place, we're oriented towards a suspended sale, and yet we're not oriented towards all items. So for example, if I do order a Coca-Cola, there's really no reason for that to go to the kitchen printer. The waiter or waitress is just simply going to take it out and deliver it to me. On the other hand, that grilled cheese on rye, they need to put something in the back for somebody to start making it. And as we thought about migrating our DOS application, it occurred to us that the ticket printing function, if handled somewhat differently, would be able to handle exactly this kind of need. In addition, we had yet a third environment called garden centers and hardware stores that had a kind of a different variation of this need. So in garden centers, for example, let's say I'm going to a garden center in my area, and they've got all manner of, flowers and shrubs and trees and what have you, but they also sell, let's say, pine straw and wheat straw. But it's not in the garden center itself. There's some, let's say, a trailer around the side, and besides garden centers, you very typically see this in Home Depots and Lowe's and the like. So when I go to buy pine straw, I go into the store and I buy whatever I'm buying, let's say batteries and fertilizer and soil and what have you, but I also want to go ahead and get 3 bales of pine straw. Okay, so those bales of pine straw are ordered in the store, but are not actually picked up in the store because they're too messy and they're kept in a trailer on the grounds. All right, this is also actually, if you think about it, very, very similar to kitchen printing. Okay, I am doing something, and in addition to generating my standard receipt, I need to, or I'd like to be able to print something in a remote location that is related to the fact that I'm buying items in a specific department that are not kept within the store. But in this case, unlike the kitchen printing side of things that we discussed, rather than this being triggered off of a suspended sale, this is being triggered off of a real sale. So we looked at all of these various kinds of scenarios and said, you know what, the ticket printing thing we do today is related. Now, wait a minute, we don't really need to use a special format, although we could, but we certainly don't want a separate receipt for each unit sold. So if I buy 3 bales of pine straw, I don't really want to see 3 different tickets in my trailer. Or if I buy two different grilled cheese on rye, I only need one thing to print in the back that says quantity 2. So it's related to ticket printing, but it's not exactly the same. So in other words, what we're saying is we're going to use a special format, but rather than worrying about printing a separate receipt for each unit, we are going to go ahead and simply print a regular ticket or a regular receipt that only contains the lines in the departments that have our special option checked. And honestly, we should probably rename this to something besides ticket printing, but that's what it says, and it's still used for that. So how do we slice and dice this? How do we reuse this function and use it for garden centers and for delis and other kinds of operations? Well, there's really only one key to it, and that happens to be to use a special option that today is currently only available in the registry. Okay, and I am going to assume right now that you folks know what the registry is. If you don't, that's kind of outside the scope of this webinar here, but in general, software packages within Windows have a special spot where they keep different options and information that are not actually stored with the data files, but actually stored by Windows itself. And this is on a per terminal or per register basis. So whenever you use a registry option, if you're in a multi-register system and you want to utilize this option on a variety of terminals, you have to modify the registry in each section or each terminal. Now the sections that we're in, you'll see on the bottom under computer H-Key local machine, don't worry about what that means. Software, InfoTouch Corporation, that would be us. And then we have a section for InfoTouch. And if you're wondering why we have a section for InfoTouch and not right directly InfoTouch Corporation, other products like Enterprise Manager have their own sections under InfoTouch Corporation. But our POS software is directly here, and you'll notice there's quite a few different options here. We won't go over those today, or most of them, but we are going to go over one, and it has the rather odd name of Delivery Ticket Format. Now, the reason it has this odd name is because the first implementation of this variation, if you would, of ticket printing was associated with garden centers and for delivery of items to those folks. And honestly, in retrospect, it's not the greatest name, but it works. And it is, by the way, in Help System. For those of you not familiar with it, press F1 from anywhere within the product, and the registry settings are actually the very last page in our Help System. And you'll notice if we come down here, there is Delivery Ticket Format. All right, and in fact, we'll use this as a little seg into describing the ways this registry setting can be used to adjust the way ticket printing works in different types of stores. So if Delivery Ticket Format is not there, and by default it won't be, then ticket printing will function the way we saw in the museum. Alternatively, you have 3 different options that you can set Delivery Ticket Format to that will change the way it works. Now, if you look at my registry, it is currently set to a value of N, which is not one of the 3 options that we have here, which are Y, S, and A, and we'll describe those in a second. So basically, if the Delivery Ticket Format does not exist, or if it's not set to one of these values, we will do ticket printing. That's why we did ticket printing in the last time we went through a sale. I'm now going to change this to Y. Okay, and if we look at the help system, it says we'll change the way ticket printing will work from printing an individual unit ticket for each item in a sale to printing a single receipt for all the items in all ticket printing departments. And there's some more description, but basically what we're going to do now, the Y basically says we are going to adjust ticket printing to print a rather normal receipt. It's still separately defined, but a normal looking receipt typically for all the items and ticket printing products at a remote location based on sales. The Y here is for sales. So we got a Y here. And before I do anything else, and I have to exit the register, oh, this is all right, maybe I'm not in the register module, good. Okay, I'm going to change the receipt format that we use because we had a rather very extremely basic one, very suitable for tickets, not necessarily so suitable for printing remote pickup or kitchen printing items. So I'm going to switch from receipt 9 for ticket printing, and it will still say ticket printing throughout the setup side, regardless of your registry setting. And I'm going to save that off. All right, so we're now using receipt format 8, which is actually, by the way, just this right now. I didn't bother to modify that, and you certainly can and probably do want to. But for right now, it is basically a standard, typical receipt that you would see at the end of any transaction. But again, based on the fact that we're doing quote-unquote ticket printing, we're only going to see items in the departments that have that checkbox. Okay, so let's go back to our register. And by the way, these changes, one of the nice things about registry changes is they take place immediately typically. In fact, I will be doing some changes while we're in the register module without reloading, and the software will adjust on the fly to those changes. So I'm in my garden center, sort of. I'm still in my museum, unfortunately, here, but that's okay. And I'm going to make a sale, and I'm going to sell some artwork. Don't need ticket printing for that or remote printing for that, But let's now say, play with me here. I'm now not really in a museum. I'm in my garden center, and I'm buying a bale of pine straw. In this case, I'm just going to buy a special first Tuesday admission, and I'll put in a quantity 2 for that as well. So remember, previously quantity 2 would generate extra receipts. Not now. So with delivery ticket format set to Y, we are going to print extra receipts to the receipt 8 format based on what we have in setup, which is not going anywhere special, which in turn will go to my PDF writer. And it's based on sales. So first we get it, as always, our normal receipts. So we've got our artwork and we've got our ticket. By the way, if you're noticing that the description does not include the name of the department, that was another feature we added recently, and I turned on for this demonstration because I thought it would be relevant to the way we would print here specifically for tickets. Do bear in mind, under Miscellaneous 6, you can now suppress the department name on receipts, the customer display, and barcode labels without any other change to the product, to the receipt formats, to the barcode label formats, etc. We simply will use these checkboxes throughout the product to decide that we no longer want to print the department name on things. Okay, so here is our first receipt. And you'll notice that it now wants to print another receipt. Now, we sold 2 items in the admission department, which prints quote-unquote tickets. But you'll find that we only want to print 1 additional receipt rather than 2, because any of the other options outside of the default ticket printing don't do that per unit receipt print. So when I go around to pick up my 2 bales of pine straw in the trailer, there it is. And notice, by the way, the clothing is not there anymore because this is my special thing, and I don't need to let the people know who are picking up the pine straw that they need to, that this person also bought a t-shirt. You'll notice the other things here, subtotal text, there's no real reason for this stuff to be here. So I just didn't get around to modifying the receipt format, but you can. And again, we have those 10 different formats, and you can assign any one for ticket printing, you can assign any one for remote printing, or for kitchen printing. All right, so, and again, only 1 extra receipt comes out, and it's going to come out in the trailer. All right, last example here, going back to the original kitchen printing. If we are in some kind of, let's say, deli, and I order the 2 grilled cheese on rye, then we're going to want to put an order back in the kitchen, but I'm suspending the sale. And let me show you quickly what happens. I'm going to just sell 1 of these tickets, and I'm going to suspend the sale. And I have a link with the customer, so I'll put in the name of Keith, and here's my original ticket. And you'll see there's no other tickets. Why? Because the registry option of Y indicates that we're only printing extra receipts for sales. If I want to print receipts solely for suspended transactions, which would be something that you would typically do in some kind of ordering up front sort of place, whether it be a bar or a deli or a Mexican restaurant or Chinese restaurant or any kind of American restaurant, grilled, we don't care what kind of restaurant, honestly, as long as they need to print something out in the kitchen and are doing it based on suspended sales rather than taking the money up front, then we need to change the value of our delivery ticket format setting to an S. So here's my regular receipt here. I'm going to make another receipt. And again, the nice thing about registry options is they take effect immediately typically. So I'm going to go ahead and sell that same thing I just sold. And you'll notice there will not be any extra receipts at all. I got my regular receipt, sure, but I didn't get any extra receipts because now we're saying we only want the extra ones to print based on a suspended sale. So here's my regular suspended sale receipt. And here comes my kitchen receipt, including the quantity of 10 that I just put in. Finally, there's one last option that may be useful in some locations, although I'm not sure, but as long as we were playing around with this, we did add it in. And that was, okay, I want an extra receipt to print remotely, that is to say on some other printer, whether it's in the kitchen, whether it's in the trailer, we don't care, somewhere else. And we want it to be done based on whether you are suspending a sale or selling. Well, honestly, I don't know how real world that is as an option. It's typically one way or the other. So in that garden center, you're buying stuff. In the sit-down restaurant, you're wanting to suspend things. In a fast food place where you play up front, you're going to basically act like you do in the garden center. You want to do it when you buy it. But just in case, we do have an option of A. And by the way, this is not case sensitive, although I would always follow the directions, which do indicate capital letters for these. And if delivery ticket is format set to A, then we will print an extra receipt for any items in ticket departments, whether you do a regular sale or a suspended sale. But the primary use for this functions are, again, to recap, in museums, in event-driven environments for printing actual tickets, and then for other environments like garden centers, like hardware stores, where you want to print something in a remote location based on sales. Also potentially in the kitchen, in fast food places, and then in a little bit more of a sit-down environment, you have the option of printing stuff in these departments based on the fact that you're doing a suspended sale only. When they actually go to pay for it at the end, we don't want to reprint out the 2 grilled cheeses back in the kitchen. That's already been done. All of these rely on the fact that you will check a ticket printing option per department and then define a specific receipt format, which is usually going to be tied to some sort of external printer that is going to be used for these special requirements. And with that, we have covered these various specialized printing topics: ticket printing, remote printing, and kitchen printing. Thank you very much.